Oh, good morning, friends. It's good to be back. You can see from my background that I have my books up. This way I don't have to hold them. And also this way you don't have to look at my living room or my kitchen or anything else. So, as I said, it's good to be back. I'm Dr. Madeline Boskowitz. I'm the author of these two books. The first one is a guidebook for teens and young adults, and the second one is the workbook for that same book. And online, I teach both books together, of course, since they go together, in about 25 or 26 small 20-minute installments, which we call evergreen, which means I recorded them a couple of years ago, and I keep running them a couple times a week. And also, but in between, I have some live sessions in which I ask for questions, and sometimes I get some. A lot of the time, people don't see my live session till afterwards. So what I've started doing is talking during those sessions, maybe adding a little bit to the books. And in case somebody does come and have questions, of course, I'm available. So so a couple of weeks ago, I posted a recording that I made actually about 5 years ago when I first published the first book, the guidebook, and it's in 5 small sections explaining what the book was about and how I managed it. I managed writing it for you guys. So I thought that today I would briefly go over how the books came about and why they're so important. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. About more than 40 years ago, I accidentally came across the work of a French psychoanalyst called Françoise Dolto, who was a brilliant pioneering woman who has not been translated into English, unfortunately, despite my efforts, but who knows, maybe that will come still. But anyway, she had a very different approach to young people in that she promoted total respect for their autonomy, meaning their individual freedom. Even at a very young age, she considered even infants to be separate beings with their own experience and their own understanding or lack of understanding of the world. And it was the parents' function to help the children understand their world by, by explaining it to them in an honest and open way, at their level, of course, but still honesty and authenticity, making it genuine, was absolutely essential for the work, for the child to be able to understand his world. And one example that she gave very early on was when she was in training. She worked at a hospital where there was a ward for abandoned infants who were not doing well. As a matter of fact, they were perishing. They weren't eating, they weren't sleeping, they did not want to live. And she would pick each one up and talk to him or her about his circumstances and why he was there. And of course, putting a positive spin on it in the way that she would say, so, your parents cared so much about you that they realized that they could not afford to give you a good life at this time. So they placed you here so we could find you better parents. It's sad that they could not keep you, but they did their best by giving you this opportunity. And it almost seemed like a miracle to the staff, but the infants thrived. They were able to accept their truth. So these infants really did thrive and were able to assume their life, and hopefully were then placed in homes or at least in a caretaking place. So She inspired me to come back to psychology. I had tried psychology as a very young woman in college, but was not really interested in what they were doing then, which was studying rat behavior in mazes. And it was not very interesting to me. So I did other things. And now I've come back to psychology. And when I was in training, I worked with kids who were wards of CPS, at least temporarily. This was a shelter for kids who were either brought in by their caretakers or acting out, or who were actually saved from the streets, thank goodness. So anyway, when I worked with them, I realized that they had a great deal of difficulty having any idea of their own self, which sounds funny, but was not. So started a small workshop where we talked about what is your identity? Who are you? How do you look at yourself? How do you become aware of yourself? How do you become aware of choices that you make? And to my great surprise and happy surprise, they really related to that. They loved being able to talk about themselves and kind of grasp as to who they were, what kind of decisions they were making, and what their life was about. So this was very exciting, and I gave this workshop several times, even in high schools, and decided that I needed to work with that idea that certainly other teens would need this kind of help. So that's how the guidebook came about. I try to see how do you help teens and young adults become more conscious of themselves, who they are, who they want to be, how to become who they want to be, how to make this kind of decisions that would work for them, and how to get back on track every time they fall off. We all do all the time. So part of that, realizing that you can always get back on track, even if you've made some severe, awful mistakes, which most teens have not, thank God. It's always possible to get back on track. So that's how the books came about to be. And in terms of their importance, how important is it to have a look at yourself? In the book, I call myself Dr. B because that's what a lot of the young people call me, and even many adults. Since I have a difficult last name, they called me Dr. B. And Dr. B was more approachable. We could talk about all kinds of things and hear all kinds of things as well. So for those of you who don't know, I was practicing as a psychologist for many years, worked with adolescents and very small children and older adults and regular adults, if there is such a thing, in all kinds of different settings, from the country to the inner city. It was a very lovely experience. I'm retired now. And eventually I wrote the workbook because some people asked, well, this is great, but how do you do those things? How do you get on track? How do you stay on track? How do you get back on track? How do you know? How do you hear your inner voice that's always good and that knows what's best for you? So I wrote the workbook. And here I'm going to be teaching both books together, of course, and I look forward to it. So later this week we will have the first installment of the course, Chapter 1, Part 1. And I hope you look forward to it, and I look forward to a live session in a few weeks. So thank you for listening. Bye-bye.